Star Fox is a 3D rail shooter series produced by Nintendo, though it hasn't had a proper game release in quite a long time, with the last one being on the Wii U with a mixed bag of reviews. Despite that, it is one of Nintendo's most beloved franchises, appearing for the first time in 1993 on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and with the help of Agronaut Games and their Super FX chip, Star Fox became one of the earliest examples of 3D graphics in video games and was a humongous success. The popularity of the series would continue to rise with the second official release for the Nintendo 64, aptly named Star Fox 64. Yeah, Nintendo really has a way with coming up with names, let me tell you what. But Star Fox 64 is also a big ticket title, being one of the top selling games in 1997, the second best selling game in the US that year, losing only to Mario Kart. Of course, with all the praise and a growing fan base, the IP would not end there. When series creators Shigeru Miyamoto and Takuya Imamura were in talks of making a third game, Miyamoto wanted to give it the old Nintendo shake-up and explore the idea of making an action-adventure game instead of the traditional rail shooter. However, production stalled due to a lack of solid ideas, as well as staff members being pulled to other projects. From the other side of the world, enter Rare. Rare at the time was a partner developer for Nintendo and was coming off of a large success of their own, Diddy Kong Racing. After its release, Rare split the development team to work on two new titles, also to be released for the N64. One being Jet Force Gemini, and the other would later turn into the subject of this video, the then named Dinosaur Planet. Pulling from the success of its predecessor, Dinosaur Planet was originally going to star Timber the Tiger, a playable character in Diddy Kong Racing. Additional fun fact, Timber was also set to be the star of Diddy Kong Racing early on in its own development, making this the second time that poor tiger got cucked by a more recognizable Nintendo character. But no, before Fox even entered the picture, the design team decided that a tiger wasn't a good fit, and opted instead for the adoptive siblings Saber the Wolf and the more familiar Crystal the Fox, both accompanied by dinosaur sidekicks. The game would feature two different but intertwined stories revolving around the two siblings' perspectives, each having their own abilities as well as their aforementioned dino sidekicks that could be given commands in real time, and the players could switch between characters with the help of a swap stone, a large rock creature that a lot of people said resembled the rock biter from a Neverending Story, and I agree. Information on the original plot of the game is a bit scarce, as I'm sure it was never fully fleshed out due to constant changes in development. But from what I've gathered, it goes a little something like this. Evil forces threaten to take over and destroy the world, and it's up to our two main characters to stop it. Crystal, the adopted daughter of the great wizard Randorn, was shown wielding a staff, signifying she might be taken after her old dad and being a magic user herself. In her section of the story, she would be exploring ancient temples and ruins that had recently been discovered, all alongside Kite, her pterodactyl companion. And as you can see, her original design is very different than the one we would end up with, being much more of a cutesy aesthetic rather than... No! Yeah, I willingly put that on my hard drive for the sake of a bit, yeah, fuck you. While you have Crystal, who's on more of a discovery quest, Saber, the biological son of Randorn, is looking to knock some heads. After the siblings' older brother is killed in battle, Randorn goes into isolation. Saber wants to get back at the enemy for what they've done and find out where their father has been hiding. Now, some of you youngsters may not remember, but back in the long ago, we had yearly centralized hub events, where all the major game studios would show off all their upcoming games all at once. But came the age of social media, and suddenly everyone and their skateboarding dog could post content to the internet for all to see. Now, it took some time, but game devs slowly realized that they don't have to scramble to get everything they have for the next year and a half, and take it to this one event infested with influencers embarrassing themselves.
So, I am here to talk about,
No, they can make their own YouTube channels or Twitch profiles, have their own employees make questionable fashion choices, crack lame jokes, have general awkward moments, or the more recent trend is to hire real A-list celebrities, pretend they give a shit about gaming. The Electronic Entertainment Expo, or E3 for short, is the yearly event everyone flocked to for everything that was to come in the gaming sphere. It was the turn of the millennium, and Rare got a demo put together for the purpose of showing it off at E3 2000. Doing so, they were met with glowing reviews from the attendees that got the opportunity to play the game. IGN saying, "As with all Rare titles, Dinosaur Planet is huge beyond huge and bigger still. The E3 demo of the game I played offered players various different mechanic choices from actions to puzzles, each totally different style. And many more likening it to The Legend of Zelda, as it featured lots of puzzles to be solved before progress could be made, a staple of the Zelda series. It would turn out these comparisons actually had a lot of merit to them. Lead software engineer Phil Tossell would later admit in an interview with Nintendo Life, "When we first began Dinosaur Planet, Zelda wasn't out yet, so the game had a significantly different feel. But when Zelda came out, I think the designers were really inspired and amazed by it, and to a large extent we emulated a lot of features." Now, all the buzz surrounding the game would make it back to Nintendo, as Shigeru Miyamoto himself was present at the event, alongside Eiji Aonuma, the creator of the Legend of Zelda series. When asked about what he thought about Rare's new title, Miyamoto said, "It looks really nice, doesn't it? I wish they would use Star Fox characters so that they could use the title Star Fox Adventures. Maybe I should call the team and talk about it." At the time, this comment seemed like Miyamoto was just joking around a bit, but it would turn out he would do just that. Later being announced, the title would now be Star Fox Adventures Dinosaur Planet. It would also be releasing on the GameCube instead of the N64, as the GameCube was set to be releasing soon in 2001. When news got back to Rare headquarters, there was of course a mixed reaction amongst the team, some happy for the opportunity to work on a title from an established franchise, while others feeling frustrated they'll have to leave behind the characters and the plots they've grown so attached to. Of course, a lot of major cuts had to come in order to make room for the Star Fox team. Most notably, the idea of having two protagonists was pitched as Saber swapped out for Fox to be the sole protagonist. Crystal, on the other hand, was initially going to be removed, but Star Fox lead designer Takuya Imamura liked the idea of having sex appeal to the franchise, as well as having a love interest for Fox. So Crystal got to stay, but she had to undergo a large design overhaul. Her features were more accentuated, as she received a more risque outfit, properly turning her into the furry sex queen we all know her as today. Also, instead of being a playable co-star, she was instead turned into a damsel in distress for Fox to save and later fall in love with. The game's original title, Dinosaur Planet, would actually be dropped, as Rare would decide to shorten it to just Star Fox Adventures. Of course, with a lot of large changes that needed to come to the game, a lot of smaller ones needed to come as well. With Saber being completely eliminated, and Crystal's plot relevance being cut drastically, their father Randorn also ended up facing the chopping block. The swap stones, originally used to swap between the two protagonists, were now warp stones, used to warp around different spots in the map. Lastly, other major Star Fox characters were placed in minor roles and functions, and Arwing segments were added where the team felt like they were needed. At last, after years of hype, wariness, and intrigue, the game would finally release in Japan and North America for the Nintendo GameCube in September of 2002, then releasing for the rest of the world later that same year. Early impressions of the game were fairly positive, giving praise to its impressive visuals and general art direction. Some even still comparing it positively to The Legend of Zelda, but sadly this short stint of praise just wouldn't last. As the new game hype began to wear off, both critics and consumers alike started to see the game for what it really was. Common criticisms revolved around the combat system, which generally consisted of mashing A while enemies charged one at a time after the player, as well as the need to collect various items, sometimes requiring the player to backtrack all the way through areas they've already been to just to get something, then bring it all the way back just to progress. Revisiting our good friend Phil Tossell, as this is something that he himself would later come to criticize. "I think the game relied too heavily on collecting things. It was a feature a lot of Rare games had at the time, and I wasn't especially a fan." All this alongside some smaller criticisms, such as voice acting choices. Critics also pointed out the obvious. The Star Fox elements just didn't feel natural at all in this setting. Seeing these well-established space explorers grounded on a primitive-looking planet with dinosaurs, all while fighting Lizard Man with spears and clubs, just didn't sit right. The game did feature Arwing sections, but they were very short, used as a transition to get to the next area, only requiring the player to fly through some rings to pass through to the next level. And there were enemies in these sections, but it didn't matter how many the player defeated, or if they even defeated any at all. Our good buddy Phil also had a comment on this. "It also felt a little too much like the Star Fox elements were tacked on," which of course they were. "I think the only thing that was what we wanted to make more of was the Arwing sections. These were added on fairly late, because the game had not been designed with them in mind from the beginning. It stretched some of our tools beyond what they're designed for, limiting their scope and refinement." Okay, for the 0.001% chance that Phil's actually watching this, sorry about the stupid accent. I actually really appreciate your honesty. But despite the mixed reception, the game was a decent success, selling roughly 800,000 copies and raking in about 30 million by 2006. Nothing to scoff at for a game of that time. But like any semi-successful video game, as the years went by, the memory of Star Fox Adventures began to fade. But that was until the year of our Lord, 2020. Video game preservationist Forest of Illusions had purchased a disc containing an early build of the game from a private games collector in Sweden. The build was still labeled Dinosaur Planet, and the files on the disc dated to December 1st of 2000. Through some file hacking, they managed to get the game working on the original N64 as well as some emulators. Afterward, Forest of Illusions would release the files to the public. This became a pretty significant leak, as the build of the game still had many of the original ideas still intact. However, the models for Saber had already been switched out for Fox, signifying that it was after Nintendo got involved. Though at many points the demo referenced Saber rather than Fox, so it was likely very soon after the decision was made to make it a Star Fox title. This exposed the development cycle of the game to a much wider audience, of course drumming up a lot of interest in what could have been if Nintendo hadn't convinced Rare to shoehorn in the Star Fox cast, also bringing in more scrutiny towards the final product despite it releasing nearly 20 years ago. With all the new interest for Star Fox Adventures, the public could reach out to some of the team members for more clarification on what working on the game was like. One of the team members being lead artist Kevin Bayliss. Following the leak, Bayliss would post to his Twitter various pages of concept art that he managed to dig up, some being before and some after Nintendo's involvement. Of course, in these posts, fans would ask him questions relating to Dinosaur Planet. One fan in particular would ask, "What do you think about the first version of the game when it was Dinosaur Planet and was supposed to be released on the N64? What version was better?" Bayliss would answer, "The GameCube version was far better. We all have high expectations and over-exaggerated memories of what we thought was great at the time, but nostalgia and what never was will always make us fantasize about what could have been." Initially, while researching this, I also found myself romancing what Dinosaur Planet would have been if released as intended. However, in preparation for this video, I played both Star Fox Adventures as well as the leaked demo, and they both played very similarly. Outside of all the Star Fox stuff, all the boring or annoying mechanics that drew criticism was still there. All the collecting, mashing A in combat, and feeding that annoying little shit before he would do anything. These very annoyances led me to not even finishing Star Fox Adventures, as I just got fed up with it. Though I liked the original idea of Dinosaur Planet and even preferred the original designs for Saber and Crystal, I just don't really see this game being a mainstay for Rare or Nintendo. It got a lot of praise at the E3 show it was demoed at, but this was well before the general public was even aware of gaming conventions like this, making it very likely that at best, Dinosaur Planet would be of cult classic status. The people who grew up with it would hold it fondly, but it's not enough fun or unique ideas for others to go back and appreciate. And that's all I have for today. If you liked the video, like, subscribe, and you have something to say, leave a comment. See you in the next one.